Some stories begin with applause and end with silence. Some begin with a dream so large it swallows a child whole before she even understands what she has stepped into. And some stories, the ones worth telling, begin in a small village where nobody is watching, where a little girl stands in front of a bedroom mirror and sings her heart out to no one at all, believing with every breath that one day someone will listen. This is one of those stories. It belongs to Courtney Hadwin, a girl from a place most of the world had never heard of, who walked on one of the biggest stages on Earth and made every single person in that building forget where they were for a few minutes. What happened to her after that moment is the part the highlight reels leave out. It is the part that matters most. Courtney was born on the 6th of July, 2004, in Heselden, a former mining village tucked into the northeastern corner of England, in County Durham. It is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where the streets are quiet and the seasons change slowly, where life moves at a pace that has nothing to do with fame or television or the restless hunger of the entertainment industry. Her parents, Paul and Anne-Marie, were hardworking people who understood early that their daughter had something unusual living inside her voice. From the time she was very small, music was not background noise in the Hadwin household. It was a language. Courtney responded to it before she had the words to explain why, moving to rhythms, humming along to melodies, dancing in the living room with her arms above her head the way small children do when they feel something deeply and don't know what else to do with it. By the time she was 8 years old, her school music teacher had noticed something in her voice that went beyond the ordinary enthusiasm of a child who liked to sing. There was depth there, a texture that didn't belong to someone her age. The teacher encouraged her to join the school choir, and Courtney did, throwing herself into weekly rehearsals with a commitment that her classmates found slightly remarkable. She was not shy about performing. In fact, performing seemed to be the one place where she felt entirely herself, entirely free. Her schoolmates nicknamed her the Rocker Girl, which tells you something about the impression she made even then, before the world knew her name. She trained seriously from an early age. Her mother drove her to Shotton Hall Theatre School on weekends, where a dedicated music teacher worked with her on phrasing, breath control, and the emotional architecture of the song. Courtney absorbed these lessons with a focus that her coaches consistently described as unusual for someone her age. She practiced scales in the early morning before school. She wrote lyrics in notebooks. By the time she was 10, she had gathered a group of neighborhood children together to sing and perform in the community, a little collective they called Durham Soul, which is perhaps the most perfectly named childhood music group in the history of childhood music groups. Their parents pooled resources to buy instruments. Small crowds gathered. A local newspaper ran a short feature about a young girl with an extraordinary voice, and the headline called her someone who had brought soul to County Durham. Her parents kept that article. She competed in Teen Star UK in Newcastle at 11 and reached the grand final. At 12, she won Hartlepool's Performer of the Year award, opened for Sister Sledge at the South Tyneside Festival in front of more than 18,000 people, and appeared on The Voice Kids UK, where her ferocious audition on Tina Turner's Nutbush City Limits earned her a place on Danny Jones's team and carried her all the way to the final. Every step of this journey was built on early mornings, long drives, saved pocket money, and a family that believed in her enough to organize their lives around her dream. Her father took on extra work to cover travel costs. Her mother barely missed a single performance. Their commitment to her was total, and it gave her a foundation that would prove essential in the years ahead when everything around her became unsteady. In the summer of 2018, Courtney Hadwin stepped off a plane in the United States for the first time in her life. She was 13 years old. She was carrying a small suitcase, a leather jacket, and a particular kind of quiet determination that lives in people who have been preparing for something for a very long time without being entirely sure what it will look like when it arrives. She was there to audition for season 13 of America's Got Talent, and she walked out onto that stage in front of thousands of people in the arena and millions more watching at home, looking every bit as nervous and small as you would expect a 13-year-old girl from a village in County Durham to look in that situation. And then she sang. What followed is difficult to describe to anyone who hasn't seen it, and unnecessary to describe to anyone who has. Her voice, tearing through Otis Redding's hard to handle, with a raw power that seemed to belong to someone 3 times her age and twice her size, stopped the room cold. The audience was on its feet before she had finished the first verse. The judges sat forward in their chairs with expressions that suggested they were recalibrating something. Howie Mandel hit the golden buzzer immediately, sending a cascade of gold confetti down from the rafters and Courtney directly through to the live shows. Simon Cowell, who has spent decades carefully maintaining his reputation as the man who feels nothing, looked across the stage at this teenage girl from Northern England and said she was like a lion. He said she walked out looking like a shy little thing, and then she sang and became something else entirely. He was right. The clip of her audition went viral within hours. By morning, it had millions of views. By the end of the week, it had hundreds of millions. The world had found Courtney Hadwin, and the world was not prepared for her. She advanced through the competition, delivering performance after electric performance, each one reinforcing the sense that this was not a television moment, but something more permanent, more significant. She finished 6th overall, a result that surprised many of her fans, but by then the outcome of the competition almost felt beside the point. She had already won something larger. She had a worldwide fan base, a viral footprint that most established artists spend careers trying to build, and the attention of Simon Cowell, who moved quickly after the season ended to sign her to Psycho Music in partnership with Arista Records. She was 14 when the contract was finalized. In interviews, she described it as a dream come true. She was excited about making original music and staying true to herself. She had every reason to believe she was standing at the beginning of something wonderful. What she was actually standing at the beginning of was something far more complicated, and in certain ways far more painful than anything she had experienced on the competition stage. The music industry is a machine. It is efficient and powerful, and it produces things that people want to consume, but it is not built for human beings in the way the human beings actually need. It is especially not built for children. For a 14-year-old girl who had grown up singing in school choirs and local festivals and small Northern English theaters, the transition into the professional recording world was immediate and total, and overwhelming in ways she could not have anticipated. Recording sessions were booked on tight schedules. Producers pitched sounds and concepts that didn't match anything she had spent her childhood building. Label executives had ideas about who Courtney Hadwin should be that had very little to do with who Courtney Hadwin actually was. She described it later with an honesty that was painful to read. People around her, she said, were telling her who she should be. She was in back-to-back studio sessions, working with multiple producers on tracks that felt foreign to her own voice and instincts. She was traveling constantly between the United Kingdom and the United States, expected to deliver polished commercial material on demand, while still being a teenager who had a home and a family and a need for the kind of ordinary life that fame was steadily erasing. The comparisons to Janis Joplin, which had felt like the greatest compliment imaginable when they first surfaced, had become a box she was being pressed into rather than an observation about her natural gift. The grit and rawness that made her voice so extraordinary were being smoothed away in the service of something more radio-friendly, more manageable, more saleable. And as that happened, something in her began to withdraw. The social media posts became less frequent. The public appearances thinned out. Fans who had followed her obsessively since the audition began to notice the silence and worry about what it meant. Rumors circulated. Had there been a falling out with the label? Was she unwell? Had something happened to her? The truth was quieter and more human than any rumor. Courtney was struggling. She was a teenager who had been placed inside a machine designed for adults and asked to perform at a professional level while still figuring out who she was. The pressure of that was real, and it wore on her in ways that took time to fully surface and even longer to fully recover from. In the autumn of 2018, while still navigating all of this, Courtney's life took another sudden and frightening turn. She was traveling by bus with a group of fellow performers between tour dates in the American Midwest when the vehicle lost control on a rain-slicked highway. The crash left her with a fractured kneecap and a mild concussion, neither of which required surgery, but both of which demanded rest, physical therapy, and a complete halt to everything she had been doing. She was taken to hospital in Madison, Wisconsin, examined, and cleared to fly home to England once her condition was stable. Her parents met her at the airport. She came home on crutches. The recovery was slow and, in some ways, clarifying. Away from the studio schedules and the label meetings and the constant movement between continents, she found herself writing again in the way she had always written before any of this began, from the inside out, about what she was actually feeling rather than what someone else wanted her to express. She wrote in a small garden shed behind the family home that had been converted into a simple recording space. She hummed to keep her voice active without straining it. She did her physical therapy exercises and felt the gradual return of her strength. Neighbors brought food. Local singers came and performed outside her window one evening. She stood on the porch with her crutches and cried, because she was grateful in a way that had nothing to do with fame. She returned to the stage before the year was out, performing at a charity benefit in Newcastle, wearing a green dress with her knee brace hidden beneath the hem. She sang a song she had written herself during her recovery, something built from the inside of her experience rather than assembled for commercial purposes, and the audience gave her a standing ovation. It was a small room compared to the arenas she had performed in during AGT, but something about it felt more real. The years that followed were a gradual and necessary rebuilding. She departed from the psycho arrangement, the creative friction having accumulated beyond the point where the relationship was serving her. She competed on AGT, the champions in 2019, but her attention was increasingly moving inward toward the question of what kind of artist she actually wanted to be. She worked with Grammy-winning producer Kevin Bowe, whose experience collaborating with artists like Etta James and Joe Cocker made him exactly the kind of collaborator she needed. Someone who understood soulful, authentic music and who had no interest in manufacturing something artificial out of a voice that was already extraordinary on its own terms. She wrote songs that reflected what she had actually been through. Songs about feeling unseen and over-controlled. Songs about the distance between who you are and who the world wants you to be. Songs that were angry and honest and unmistakably hers. The reaction, when she began releasing this material, was immediate and significant. You Only Love Me When I Lie was described by critics as a raw blues soul anthem, emotionally precise and vocally powerful in a way that her earlier label material had never quite managed to be. Her project Little Miss Jagged, released in 2025, was received as the most fully realized work of her career so far, evidence that the years of difficulty and withdrawal had not dimmed her talent, but concentrated it. A stripped-down performance video of one of the singles went viral and left viewers genuinely moved. Writers said she sounded like something burning, which is exactly right. She always did. In April 2024, she performed at Carnegie Hall, selected personally by the legendary industry figure Clive Davis to open a gala with a Janis Joplin tribute. That detail is worth sitting with for a moment. The girl who had been compared to Janis Joplin at 13, then pressed into a mold that had nothing to do with that comparison, then released from that mold, then rebuilt herself from the ground up, now stood in one of the most prestigious concert halls in the world and paid tribute to the artist she had always most resembled on her own terms. In front of an audience of people who had spent their lives in the music industry and could tell the difference between real and manufactured from the first note. They gave her a standing ovation. She is 20 years old now. She lives in the northeast of England, close to County Durham, close to the roots that held her when everything else was shifting. She has more than 1 million followers across her platforms and engages with them with a transparency about her mental health and creative process that has earned her a loyalty that goes well beyond the typical fan relationship. She talks openly about what she went through during the years inside the industry machine. She has described the burnout and the loss of identity and the pressure to perform before she was ready. She has said that reclaiming her voice felt like reclaiming herself. The heartbreak in Courtney Hadwin's story is not a single dramatic moment. It is the quieter tragedy of a child who was extraordinarily gifted, extraordinarily brave, and placed inside a system that was never designed to protect those qualities. It is the story of what the entertainment industry does when it finds something genuine and tries to make it more useful. It is the story of what gets lost in that process and the enormous effort required to find it again. But there is something else in this story too, something that matters more than the tragedy. There is Courtney at 20, standing in a garden studio in County.